Good night, everyone. Johnson. I got this good and got this good all the time. My name is Armor J of Spirit Divine. I'm here to give you a word on tonight. The snare had been broken. Come from Psalms 124, 1 through 8. So now Israel acknowledged. Now you may remember back then in their history, they would not acknowledge God from saving them. They was complaining, talking about you could have just left us in the wilderness. But now Israel acknowledged that God had saved them. When the Egyptian came to attack them, if it had not been for God on their side, they would have been torn into pieces. So if the Lord had not been on our side, let Israel say, God give them all help to beat their enemy. But they stated if God had not given them, had given his people help, the enemy would have destroyed them. So God stepped in. God had helped his chosen people. And that is due to ancestor Abraham. you know so that's why God protected them so much and loved them, made them special, made them their own special unique nation, all because of Abraham. So God gave them help, to beat their enemy. They stated if God had not been on their side, if God had not given his people help, the enemy would have destroyed them. So if the Lord had not been on our side when the people attack us, but God, again and again, many times the Lord had appeared to be on their side. You remember God fed them. Remember their clothes didn't wear out. God was there for them. And they would have swallowed them alive. When their anger had fear against them. So they acknowledged God when the Egyptian had came after them, but God had swept them into the sea. The entire army of Pharaoh that had followed the Israelite into the sea. Now God had covered all their enemies up. When they looked back, the enemy was behind them. God covered them under that Red Sea. And now they acknowledged that God was on their side. They said if it had not been for God that was on our side, we would have been under that Red Sea along with Pharaoh and his men. So the flood would have engulfed us, terminal would have swept over us. Because if there wouldn't have been the Egyptian down there, if God wouldn't have been on their side, they would have been in under that sea, just like the Egyptian. They would have been under there along with them. But if it wouldn't been for God, they wouldn't have had they would have been under the Red Sea. But God has saved them. God saved them. God allowed all of them to be alive and had Pharaoh all his men under the Red Sea. So the regular water would have swept us away. Now the regular water is smelling waves of the sea, and they wouldn't cause them prosecution over their lives, but God stopped it. If the Egyptian would have got to the Israelite, when they looked back, that was behind them, they would have caused them prosecution, pain, slavery. Cause they was in slavery under them. So if Pharaoh would have caught a hold of them, if God wouldn't have got to them first, they would have been back slaves. They would have had prosecution. They would have been beaten. They would have had everything done to them. But God has saved them. God has stopped the Israelite, from being destroyed, and the Israelite had survived. So praise be the Lord who had not let us been torn by their teeth. So thank God for the deliverance from all Pharaoh army, which they could have never had been delivered. So we'll give all praise to God. We're going to get all praise to God because it was God that saved them. They panicked. They had just come from slavery, from under Pharaoh, and their men was pressing them. So they got a chance to get loose, and then they look back, he behind them again. You know, so thank God for the deliverance from Pharaoh army. You know, now we have escaped like birds, you know, from the flower of the snares. The snare had been broken and we had escaped. Now the Israelites said God came and saved them. You know, God had, they was like in a big old net, and God came and saved them. God had broke that net so they all can escape. You know, so a bird is trapped in a big net. You know how birds trap in a big net? And they cannot escape. But God had broke that net. You know, and God allowed his people to escape like birds. You know, so the snare was broken and they had escaped. You know, throughout the history of Israel, they should have been destroyed by now. You know, all through their history. You know, they could have been destroyed by now. You know, but God was protecting them. God was protecting them. You know, but the hand of God was upon their life. You know, and they had many enemies and close calls. You know, but God loved, cover, and protect them due to Abraham. You know, so the Israelite, that was like in a big old net, you can say, for 400 years. They was in slavery, you know, they was beaten, you know, all they was just being oppressed, you know, and they was given hard work to do and everything, you know, but then God came along. God said it's about time for y'all to get out of that net. You know, it's about time for y'all to get out of the net. So God broke that net for all the chosen one to escape. And you know that was 2 millions of them. It was 2 millions of the Israelites. You know, so God broke that net and allowed them to escape and march on out of that gate. You know, so our help is in the name of the Lord, you know, to make up heaven and earth. You know, now sometimes we may feel trapped. You know, sometimes we may feel trapped. Oh, God, mercy. Sometimes we may feel trapped, you know, and overwhelmed of our storms, our trials and tribulation. You know, but like you in a big neck. You gonna feel like you in a big neck sometimes, being oppressed, being overwhelmed, you know, situation after situation. But God will provide a way out. You know, just like the Israelite had them to escape like birds. God came to their rescue. You know, and God helped them in a time of need. You know, for He is on their side. You know, now all the trials and tribulations that Israelite had went through, God was able to escape. They was able to escape like birds. And God had broken a snare for his people. You know, now God has saved his chosen people due to Abraham and the Israelite acknowledged if it had not been for God on our side, you know, we wouldn't have made it. And that's the same thing I say too. You know, I've been in this storm for a long time. But what I can say that God still has been good to me. You know, He's still been saving me. You know, just like the Israelites. They was in that storm for a long time. Remember, it took them 40 years to get to the promised land. But God was still with them. God was still feeding them, provide for them and everything. You know, so God was on their side the whole time. He did not left their side. You know, and the Israelite acknowledged, you know, that if it hadn't been for God on their side, Pharaoh people, you know, men would have ate them alive. You know, would have ate them alive. You know, but thank God for God. Thank God we have God to help, to stand forward, to fight our battle. You know, so that's all the word I have for you tonight. And remember, sometimes you might feel like you're overwhelmed. You might feel like you're just in a big net that you just can't move and go nowhere. You know, but you just have to keep on praying, and remember what our help come from. Remember where our help come from. You know, he comes on his own divine time. You know, and he will come and save. So that's all the word I have for you tonight. Y'all have a blessed and safe night, and I see y'all in the next video.